Hello, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I'm your host, Rrr and Stubble McShave is here with us today. We're going to be talking about the Wheel of Time series, episode 7 from season 1 of the live action series. And Stubble and I were talking just a few minutes before I started the recording about how great this series really has been. I personally feel that after episode 1, this series really has just blossomed, and we're very lucky to get what we've gotten so far, and I've loved it. But Stubble, you've already ranked episodes, and I asked you, we're definitely going to, once all the episodes are finished being released, we're going to look at the series as a whole and talk about that in a separate video. But I look so forward to getting your opinions and comments about the episodes and specific things that you found relevant that may or may not have been addressed, as well as other things that you have on your mind. Now, you mentioned to me, Stubble, I just mentioned to you that I have a feeling they're going to leave us with a cliffhanger. And you mentioned that you have a feeling that you know where that cliffhanger is going to be. But I said, don't tell me. But go ahead and tell me where you think it is, because the final episode has not been released yet. And I think it'd be interesting for you to predict where it might be. And we can see if that is actually true, whether episode 8 will leave us on the cliffhanger that you think it will. So go ahead and tell us, if you don't mind, Stubble, where you think it may leave us.
Either the first season will end with this, or the second season will begin with this. But I think we will see some ships arriving from the west.
It makes sense.
And you don't know what I'm talking about here, because you have not read or listened to the second book yet.
I have not, but I've heard about it because they've talked about it in this episode. Was it once or twice where the Blue Aja had spoken about seeing ships and having to go and investigate these ships that were landing?
They were investigating ships that were missing.
Missing ships.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it was in episode 5 there, or 6. Oh, I don't remember now. Probably 6. but I wouldn't be surprised if we get that as a sort of a cliffhanger. But who knows? I may be way off.
I think you're probably spot on, Stubble, because what a great episode that would be to like start off with that or to end with that. Like it would be very, exciting to see that or find out or witness disappearing ships or see where they might be going or something to that degree. That would be very, very interesting to see. And we're constantly seeing things we haven't seen in each episode. And I just really enjoy seeing stuff like this. And it just has been building up this excitement and the interpretation of what, is in the books. I just think that it's so wonderful what we've gotten so far. So I wouldn't be surprised that you were right.
And I know that you like the romantic stuff in movies and TV shows, so I guess you like this episode.
I love this episode. Yes, I do love the romantic stuff. I love anything like that. This one definitely hit, all the right spots for me. And I can't wait to talk about it. But yes, I'm absolutely thrilled with what we got in this episode. And I think a lot of viewers would be thrilled with it as well. So let's talk about the Wheel of Time, episode 1, season 7, The Dark Along the Ways. And so this is another episode where we start off by seeing what's called the Battle of the Shining Walls, Blood Snow. It's the final battle of the Aeol War. And boy, it really, you just are dropped into it, aren't you?
Yes, and in the books you get some of this from the fever dreams of Tam when they're traveling. I don't know if you picked up on that in when you watched this, but that's what he's raving about in his not so lucid moments. But so yeah, and we see an Aiel woman running over a battlefield. And we see that it's at the slopes of Dragon Mount. And she seems to be pregnant.
Yeah, I mean, they really threw us threw us there, because that was the last thing I was expecting to see, is a
Yeah,
pregnant woman on the battlefield. I have to say, Stubble, that really was. It's very hard to. It's one thing to read something, but it's even harder to see a woman fighting at this level of skill. Really, just fighting for her and her baby. I mean, it is a battle, but you get the sense that she's trying to make sure that her baby survives, don't you?
yeah, and you see that she's quite capable. And they'll call it dance the spears. So they are. I don't know how much we should get into this, but they are like clans that constantly fight each other. And in the Aiel War, the Aiel clans have invaded the rest of the world for uh, for a reason. And this is just at the end of the Aiel War, and she's goes into labor, but she isn't left alone, is she?
She isn't. Her name is, and I had to, of course, look it up. Tigraine Mantir, and
Yeah,
she's just at a point where she's literally covered in blood. All her weapons are covered in blood. She's desperate, and she goes into labor, as you said, and she's sitting down. And as she sits down, she comes across, another final opponent, so to speak. She's in the he has the advantage because he's standing over her, and
yeah.
she's sort of like leaning up against a rock. It's very uncomfortable, I'm sure, because at this point she's actually, despite her incredible prowess and ability to fight off all of her attackers, at this point she has been, what I probably would say, is mortally injured, hasn't she?
Uh, I don't know. She gets mortally injured later on when she gets a dagger in her side, but at this point she's certainly injured, and she's trying to find a safe place to give birth to her child.
Yes, and essentially what we're witnessing is a woman who's going to give birth on a battlefield, and it is quite alarming. Of course it's alarming, that any woman should really be put in this position, but this lady is tough as nails. I mean, they're
Yeah.
God bless her. She's just obviously taking life as it comes, and has sat down at a point where she is in labor, and she looks up kind of like that, and she sees this man standing above her, and it looks very precarious because,
Yeah.
she, as I said, she's at a disadvantage, and
I,
I'm
I
just
must
gonna,
I must say that the actress was phenomenal. She was great,
she
and
was great,
and I
yes.
looked up her. She's actually a stunt woman, a Czech stunt woman who has done some acting, but is primarily a stunt woman. And I thought she was magnificent in this part.
Yeah, I feel like I have to find out what her name is, but
Her, her name is Magdalena Sitova.
right, that's right. That is her name.
Yeah,
You're correct. She is incredible, and she makes it look easy, but that was a hard scene to film,
yeah,
um, especially in combination with the weapons. She's very clever in her attack moves, and she uses what's to her advantage to kind of like bolster her strengths against
yeah.
these attackers. And it's not easy fight. Those men are very well abled soldiers with armor on, and I thought she was going to be killed.
Yeah,
And I
and
guess in a way she is, but
yeah,
uh,
and you get the sense that these soldiers are certainly capable soldiers, but they haven't fought this kind of enemy earlier. It's not. It's a very different kind of fighting from what they're used to, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a completely different type of fighting than any of us are used to. This woman is very, very skilled and slick, and she has the ability to put people off their center, which she does more than once that we've seen, and nothing was going to stop her. And she really did, fight, and you could tell. I mean, when she enters the scene, she's covered in blood,
Yeah.
so she's been fighting all day long, and she's desperate, and she's kind of in this position about to give birth, and the scene kind of stops there. But should we continue talking about that scene, or should we go to where they're in the ways? What do you want to talk about? Do you want to continue to say what happens with her?
Just say that she fights off the attackers who are of the companions of Ilian. It's the fighting force there, and but she is going to give birth, but then someone arrives with pointing a sword at her. And did you recognize the sword at that scene?
I did recognize the sword, and I think they did a good job of doing that, because what he does is that he plants the sword in the ground first,
Yeah,
right?
he does that later in the later flashback, but here we just see him point it at her.
And there's something very special on the sword that
Yeah.
Stubble is referring to, and we did see that very special emblem on the sword earlier. In was it episode 2? I think it was episode 2.
Oh,
That
I know we
someone.
see it in episode 1. It's when
Oh, it was in episode 1, right after
at
the
the
trolley
Trolloc
scene.
attack. Yeah.
Mhm. I couldn't remember if that was in episode 1 or 2, but we do see this special emblem on the sword, and it is very special. It's a very unique looking design, and you can't forget it. But also, um, and if after we talk about the next scene, there's something else very significant about it, and it really is so wonderfully done and exciting to see, but very stressful moment
Yeah.
when you're looking at it in this live action scene. So I think that they really built this up, and boy, I mean, like you're just like, I was just like, you
Yeah.
just catch your breath, with the excitement of it all, and what is the outcome going to be. So
Yeah.
right at
Uh,
that
uh,
moment.
uh, yeah. And the child is a special child, but maybe we should come back to that later on, perhaps.
Let's come back to that a little bit later. And you're right. Clearly, this is no ordinary event, is it?
No.
Um, so we're brought to a scene where we're back with the party without Matt. We just entered into the ways, and the ways look, as I've said before, a very scary, dark, dreary path that they have to travel on, and they need to go into the ways because this is kind of like their super highway. They can travel, an entire continent in an entire day, and they need, the ability to do that here because they're trying to get to the eye of the world as fast as possible. And so, um,
Yeah. And I must say that I thought the lighting in there was brilliantly done when they have lit their torches and so on, because uh, it could be very easily be that we didn't see a thing and we have to adjust the light on the brightness on the screen, and or it could be too much, but it was just the right type of lighting for you know sh- showing what we needed to see, but at the same time give the impression of that it is complete darkness if you don't have any light source with you.
it really is, and it's terrifying, just the idea that that pathway is just so in the dark, and, as you said, without those torches, they would be in complete and utter darkness, and it seems very, very scary, and you would get lost. This is not an easy way to navigate as well, so we needed to have the Ogier, Liel with them so that he could guide them. And what's interesting is that, did the Ogiers build the ways, Stubble?
Uh, um, Not in the books. They didn't build the ways. It was the male channels that built the ways because they were given sanctuary at the steading, and as a thank you, they constructed this network between the different OG steadings. But I don't know if the TV series will go with that lore, or if they're going to go with the lore that the Doge built them. It doesn't matter all that much. What matters is that they are in different places all over the continent, and it's like you enter a different dimension, more or less, that makes you travel
Well,
faster.
it's
Yeah,
definitely a different dimension because we see that they had to Moraine had to open up this special portal just to get, a special gate just to even get into the ways. And as it's closing and they're calling out to Matt, because we kind of pick up from where we left off in episode 6 at the end. Matt is not running to that entrance. Like, he's not
no,
going in. And we discussed several reasons why, but what's interesting is how his friends are saying, oh no, we can't, we have to reopen it to get Matt back in here. And, we can't just leave him there. And there's quite a lot of discussion about this.
yeah.
And to be honest with you, they can't open the portal again, can they?
Now, the channeling, if they channel to open the way gate, then it draws the Machin Chin, this black wind, as they refer to it as. And so you just can channel when you are going to leave the place. If you're opening the way gate again, and then you'll be hit by this wind before you get to your destination. So yeah, and it seems that Moraine is a bit more wary about Matt. She doesn't really trust him. I don't know if you trust him, but trust his what he would do if he ever got to the other world. She seems a bit wary of him, I think.
Well,
So yeah,
you make a really good point with this because everything that we've been shown, and I know you said that there are things such as an unreliable, um,
narrator.
narrator in the story, but everything we've seen so far with Matt almost forces us to question how he would behave. And
Yeah,
it is kind of unfortunate that he has had such a difficult time through this. I mean, when I think about difficulties in regards to everybody has had challenges with Nynaeve being captured by a Trolloc, or even Perrin being attacked and having that wound that seems to have changed him somehow. But of all the party, Matt seems to be the one who's suffering the most, and
yeah,
perhaps it's not solely because he had that dagger, but I think that that accelerated the process for him. And
yeah. And we haven't seen Matt really since after episode 2. We haven't seen the real Matt because he's been affected by this cursed dagger that's affected his mind. So we haven't
Mhm.
seen his true self, but this corrupted personality that he has since then. So it's hard to judge what his true self, what he would do, because the last couple of episodes he was, he was in a dark place mentally.
He was in a dark place, and we still don't know. I mean, I'd like to think he didn't, that he wasn't the one who killed that family, that farm family. Um, you know, I hope that it wasn't him, but that's also something that was a question. He's been, while they've all been chased by the Fade, he personally almost seemed like he was face to face with one on his
Yeah,
own. That was terrifying. And I don't think any of them have had that situation necessarily, ever, and not really been solo. So we don't really know what Matt, in addition to the dagger, has been exposed to. So there's a lot going on with him. And I guess if Moraine is just looking at it from what she's seen so far, the fact that she had to help Matt, and she said that he drew upon the daggers, it was feeding on him, and he drew upon it.
yeah.
And
That's what she thinks, at least, because
yeah, so
even if she's telling the truth, it's the truth that she believes, and
yes.
maybe she's mistaken. Who knows?
Yes, absolutely. And, all the while she's saying this, and, she's very leery of him, I fear for Matt because it seems like he's gotten a much rougher road than everyone else, in my opinion. So even with
Yeah.
everyone looking after him, even with Maureen, channeling that dagger's influence off of him, it's been rough for him. Matt hasn't had a moment's rest,
No.
and I can see why she might think he isn't up to the challenge just from his obstacles so far.
And it seemed that he was, as the TV series has presented it. It's not presented this like this in the book, but as the TV series has presented it, it seems like he's the grown up in the family. He's the responsible one, and
He certainly is. Yeah, the
he
way that
he
they
hasn't
show his family, yes.
he hasn't had an easy time with what the how they presented his parents and all of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, they made it seem like his father had some issues with his family, and
Yeah, I'm
that
still, I'm
kind
still, I'm still, I'm still bitter about that. I don't like that bit, but I hope he has a character arc where he redeems himself later on.
let's hope he does,
Yeah.
because he certainly didn't deserve that. And then we also learned from, I guess, from Liao that the Ways used to be actually a very lush place
Yes.
filled with grass, and it almost sounds like a paradise,
Yeah.
Stubble.
Yeah, and it wasn't dark; it was light, and it was,
Mhm.
like a pleasant place to be with grass and trees and fruits and also, a nice place. But it's all been corrupted for unknown reasons. Why?
Yeah, and something has happened. I mean, clearly, the way that it looks and the fact that it's being used or was formerly used as a way for people or let's say even Ogiers to go from steadings or people traveling, in a way that was meant to be efficient. It's such a different place. It's filled with darkness, and then on the sides, as Liel says, there's if you fall off of the path, you end up in a bottomless pit. Now that sounds like hell. I mean, I've heard descriptions of
Yeah.
bottomless pits and all sorts of stuff.
Falling forever. On the other hand, you never hit the ground if it's bottomless. But uh, I thought that was kind of amusing because Loyal, amusing in a kind of way. It's not amusing to fall in a bottomless pit, but because someone asks Loyal, what's worse than a bottomless pit? Oh, I can think of several reasons. He starts to list them off, and they have to interrupt him because that's one thing I like. He can talk and talk and talk, and people have to interrupt. If you check his scenes where he starts talking, everyone interrupts him because he can go on forever. And so uh, I like that aspect on the TV show that they have included that.
Yeah, it is nice to have him there as part of the party, and they do need him because he has traversed the ways before, and I'm sure maybe Moraine and Lan have also traversed the ways, but
I don't know
um,
if he has traversed them, but he knows about them. He has studied them, so he can find his way there.
he certainly can. And one of the things that we find out uh, rather quickly is that as they're walking on their journey, Perrin seems to be able to see things virtually in the dark. And, that would be something that maybe a wolf might be able to see in the dark, and certain animals can see without very good
Yeah,
light. And so people question, the party questions him, how did you see that? And, what he's seeing is a special guiding stone that's
yeah,
on the path of the ways.
yeah. And do you think that Perrin had special abilities to see in the dark, or what do you think?
Yeah, I do. I
Yeah,
think that he saw it from quite a distance,
yeah,
and, he was alarmed by what it was. That was the thing that I thought was very interesting, was just like, he was like, "Well, what's that?" Like, and I guess for me as the observer looking at it, it looks like an ordinary stone.
yeah.
So I'm curious as to what alarmed him about it. I think what he was alarmed by, and I'm not sure, is how messed up and damaged it was, because the path itself seems very, I'm not going to say orderly, but the stones are sort of like all shaped a certain way.
Yeah.
And to see this
Which was
stone,
probably a good thing for the production. They could move around the set, rebuild it and so on. It was probably constructed if you
yes.
go out if you break the fourth wall for a moment there. So yeah, but it's even if I saw the behind the scenes feature, and they based that on some kind of natural stone formation, but I don't remember where. But it exists in the world, that kind of hexagonal stone shape. So, but I like the design, I must say, even if it
Yes.
was dark and scary.
It was dark and scary, and they had to have some sort of pathway that we could see because they
Yeah,
couldn't make the pathway dark. It wouldn't work in a live TV production, so to speak.
yeah,
Perhaps in real life, it's actually pitch black everywhere,
yeah,
and that's even more terrifying. But for the purpose of watching a live action series, they couldn't do that because you wouldn't be able to see anything. So they had to have some kind of just maybe a little bit of bright
yeah.
on the
No,
floor.
but you could only see a certain radius from them. There was an ominous dark outside in the edges of their vision. So I think they managed to, as I mentioned earlier, to get the perfect lighting for that kind of scene.
I agree with you 100%. And Perrin, remarkably sees this guiding stone. He doesn't know what it is.
No,
And the only people who know what it is, of course, is Moraine, Lan, and Liel.
loyal.
And yeah, Loyal. And uh, Loyal says they mention it's a guiding stone. And he mentioned something very sinister. He believes that it was damaged so that I think that he said it. I'm not sure, but they say that someone may have damaged the stone to make it difficult for someone to find their way.
Yeah, it was marked by it was scratched and marked, and so it was hard to read. So maybe they tried to make it difficult to find the right way. That's his conclusion. Maybe it's correct. Who knows?
Well,
Uh,
it's certainly, I don't know what it looks like undamaged. So,
yeah, and
they,
I liked his comment there when he was trying to read it. I'll ask for your patience, and then I think it was Rand who said, "Oh, if he's asking for patience, then we have to wait," or
yes.
something to that effect. So yeah, but they while he's reading the guide stone, they're setting up camp for, if you call it, for the night, for some rest, and there seems to be something following them. There's a figure following them. Did you see who it was?
I did. After they exited I thought I saw who it might be after they exited the ways. But
Yeah,
while they were in the ways, and since something happens in the ways, there is something that we see in the ways, but I don't know whether that was what was following. I don't know if that
uh,
character was already there.
yeah. There was
And
some kind of lightning flash in the waves, and there was just for half a second we saw him in the background there in the waves. I don't know if you picked that up or not.
I'm going to go back and slow it down, just go very slow and see if I can pick up that
Yeah,
and just keep looking because my eyes popped open as soon as I saw the lightning flash.
yeah,
And of course, what you're talking about is the fact that while they're resting, as Leal is reading the guiding stone, um, Egwin hears a noise in the wind, so to speak,
yeah,
and out of nowhere, at some point pops a Trolloc.
yeah.
And, I wasn't expecting to see a Trolloc there. I don't know why though, because the place is so dark and spooky. I should have expected to see anything in there.
Yeah. But they come to the he's supposedly Egwene channels and throws him over the edge, and he falls down that bottomless pit. And I guess he's still falling, I suppose. But uh, but in the books, they when they travel the ways, they find dead Trollocs. Uh,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
and here they found one who came upon them, and I suppose because they say that, oh, this must be the way they arrived undetected at the two rivers. They found a waygate that took them there. That's why there were this surprise attack in the first episode.
And then you mentioned Egwene. She says something like, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to channel."
Yeah,
And we can clearly see channelings going on because we can see that sort of special type of effect that they use to show that channeling has taken place.
yeah.
And
And
so,
I just wanted to mention also about the Trolloc before we move on to. I assume that he had followed a group of Trollocs and got lost from his group, and it's pitch black there without any light source. So he was probably wandering around there for days or something, and then he just stumbled upon this group of people or something. That's just my assumption.
well, it makes sense.
Yeah,
It makes sense. He may have been with a group of Trollocs and, he was the one that was left behind, and he
yeah.
probably wasn't expecting to see anybody else in there except for other Trollocs. So,
Maybe the
um,
first light source is seen for weeks or something.
yes, yes. And of course, since we know that there was channeling that took place,
Yeah,
it draws in, the Mash and Shin.
yeah.
And the Ogier says very clearly that Trollocs should not be found in the ways.
No,
So, you know, um
and it was probably the Trolloc that had defaced the guiding stone as well. He thought.
oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
I think he said that.
yes. And, they conclude when I say they, Lan, Moraine, and the Ogier conclude that this is probably how the Trollocs have been traveling
Yeah,
undetected, because this was something that Moraine was asked about, "Why didn't you warn people about the Trollocs?" And, you know, no one could seem to explain, how they were, I guess, maybe suddenly appearing in the 2 rivers, for example,
yeah.
or
How do you take hundreds, if not thousands, of big monsters through several days of journey through inhabited country that should have given rise to suspicion. But if they're just popping out at a waygate somewhere, then yeah, that explains the thing.
And here's the other question that I had really is just they had said that Trollocs are not supposed to be in the ways or they're not allowed in the ways. What is the story behind that?
Oh, I don't remember exactly what you're referring to, but it's like, well, they haven't experienced of ever being there before because you need someone to open the ways for them to get into the ways. So it means that someone had to open uh, the ways for them to get there. And I'll just jump ahead and then we can jump back because
Mhm.
in uh, in the last the show we did on episode 6, I was wondering about she was using the one power to open the way gates, and I was a little confused about how they were going to solve that later on because there were non-channelers who are going to use the ways later on if they're not changing that bit. But there were some photos released that from scenes that wasn't in this episode, where we see Padan Fane, the peddler who's been following them. He has a little a little leaf in his hand, and it's reminiscent of the thing that's used to open the way. So I guess it's a terra angreal. It's so to speak an object that's used for an object that's um, either you can use without channeling into it. Moraine had that box on her wall. She channeled into it, and it did a thing. And this leaf also does a thing, and it probably opens way gates.
So it's I guess, like an enchanted leaf that
Yeah,
allows him to, navigate the ways without
yeah,
channeling.
yeah,
It's a very convenient tool to have.
So I guess
And
that's how they're going to solve the other things later on. So I just wanted to insert that there. But
that's good to know because so far we've only seen channeling used to either open, a gateway, and at this point they're at a bad way because someone has channeled, and the Mashinshin is on its way, and also there it feels now that they've also seen the Trolloc, that's an additional fear that they have that there may be possibly more Trollocs
yeah,
in the ways, and the Trollocs could be on the way to hurt them. So there's
yeah,
a certain sense of urgency to get out of the ways, even though they're perhaps not necessarily prepared to go any place other than the eye of the world at this very moment.
yeah,
So now Lan very cleverly says, hey, why don't we take the party to Faldara?
right.
And but before they can get to Faldara, the Mashinshin ends up talking to all of them.
Yeah, and it's really uh, I like this because this is not the way it works really in the books, but it works perfectly in the TV series because in the TV series we normally don't get internal thoughts and all of those things, but the wind spells it out for us what all their insecurities and fears are, and that's a great storytelling technique for this for to use in a TV series because normally you never get that. You never get the most subconscious private thoughts about your characters. You only get, what they show on camera, but here you get an excuse to reveal all their most what they fear most at the moment at least. And
Definitely, definitely.
yeah, and I'm checking my notes here.
Uh-huh.
And it tells Moraine that or Moraine hears her own voice in her head say that she's wrong about everything and she will kill all these young people just for um, to make
Something she's not
herself
sure about. Yeah.
yeah, and call herself a hero for doing it or something like that.
And what's really there's actually some truth to that because she has kind of alluded to the fact that she doesn't know who the dragon is, and that by bringing the other rest of the party with them, that they will die. So there's actually some truth to some of this about not that she's wrong, but it is true. Some of them, let's say if they all go to the eye of the world,
Yeah,
some of them will die, right? So, I mean, this is what she's been saying.
that's what she thinks at least.
Mhm. No, what you know
uh,
what I mean, like,
yeah,
this is what it's the voice is kind of telling her this thing, and,
yeah,
I think it's very interesting that, it's like, okay, this is kind of on the order of what she was saying. She doesn't quite know who the dragon is at this point,
no,
and, I think that the message that Machin Shin gave her about her thinking that she's a hero or, a heroine is false. I think that she doesn't look at herself that way. I think that
no.
she sees herself as someone who's on a journey and needs to finish the journey.
Yeah, but I thought this was interesting in another way as well, because you know people who tell themselves things over and over. You have this record in your back of your head that says that you're never good enough, that you're doing something wrong, that you know all that uh, negative record that just goes in the back of your head. That's more or less what they are hearing, but they are hearing it very directly. But so. Uh, more I thought that was kind of interesting because you know everyone has their insecurities and their fears about what they're doing wrong and what's wrong with them and all of that, and I thought that was, yeah, it was kind of interesting, I thought.
It was very interesting. The next person that they focus on is Egwene, and
Yeah,
the voice kind of tells her, you're nothing, you're an imposter. And something that I thought was really interesting is that Egwene has what they call imposter syndrome in the ways, like
yeah,
they've done all these studies on imposter syndrome and how people in our modern world feel that they are not up to par for what they're striving for,
yeah,
or that, you may have gotten the job, this big job, but you can't handle the work, and it's called imposter syndrome. And I just thought that that was really funny. I was not expecting to see someone have imposter syndrome. in the Wheel of Time, but here it was.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a serious thing. It's a serious psychological situation for a lot of people. And I think it's very insightful because this is probably something that was written way before people even started talking about imposter syndrome, as a whole. And I
Yeah.
almost wonder whether they got the idea from the book. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
In the book, this doesn't happen. This,
Right.
it's another form of uh, thing that the machine Shin does in the books. It's this is just for a TV series, but it's expertly used in the TV series to give a lot of information about the characters and their fears.
Yes, and Rand hears the voices that he hears say Egwene will never love you and she's going to leave you, and
Yeah.
like I'm thinking to myself, gee, that's awful. Like that's the worst thing. The woman that he loves, to have that type of message given to him, he's already worried about that. He's been
Yeah.
worried about that from day one, and so he's
Yeah.
been worrying about it all this time, even though he's with her. Is
Yeah.
the idea that she's going to leave him and become possibly Egwene will leave him. But first it was as a wisdom, and now it's as an Aes Sedai. And
Yeah.
so, he's really, I'm sure this really upset him very much.
Yeah. It just
Um,
reinforces those negative feelings.
mhm. And Perrin, I thought this one was very, very cruel. It tells him that he killed his wife because he loved another woman more than his wife, and I was like, this is very cruel. I mean, even if that is true, it's still very cruel to do to
Yeah.
him because he's a good guy. I mean, I don't think there's an evil bone in Perrin's body, in my opinion. So,
Yeah.
even despite the fact that he had that injury and he, like his eyes are glowing yellow,
Yeah.
he never had any harmful intent towards anyone.
Yeah.
So,
And this is connected to the love triangle that's introduced a little bit later in the episode, but I wasn't too keen on that. I get why they did it. They needed to insert some tension in the episode, but I don't think it will go past this episode. It was just for this moment, I think.
I think the love triangle scenario was not believable, but it's okay. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes you do care for someone and you're not in a relationship with them.
Yeah.
That does happen. So I wouldn't be surprised, since they all grew up together, that they have
Yeah.
deep feelings for one another, and maybe those feelings go a little bit farther than friendship. I wouldn't
Yeah.
be surprised of that. That's
Uh,
not something that
yeah.
when
And
go ahead.
yeah. No, I just thought that, and with Perrin, killing his wife, that must have played in his head 100 times, maybe 1,000 times during these months that they have been traveling, and he's thinking, was it something else? Was it just an accident, or was it something else? And then you get this voice that puts words to the feelings that he's had for a while, that maybe there was something else. I get I guess that maybe his wife and he didn't love each other. Maybe they were very loving towards each other and everything, but maybe he has some doubts, and then they just build, was it something else? And then this wind comes and give him, you know, that thing that's played in the back of his head all this time, and just brings it to the forefront. But it was not nice for him to.
It was horrible, and you just know that this wrecked him, mentally, and they had already alluded to the fact that his physical wounds were healed, but
Yeah.
his other wounds were still there. And so this really just played on him and, hurt him very badly. I mean, perhaps he was the one who was hurt the most of all.
Yeah.
Um, and then for Lan, as you had mentioned, the Machinchin tells him that, he's not going to be able to protect her, meaning, and I don't know whether when they said her, it meant Moraine or Nynaeve or
I
both
had
of.
that. I had that question for you. Who do you think it was referring to?
I think he's referring to Nynaeve.
Yeah, I don't know, because it could be either of them. So
Yeah, it could be. I think it's Nynaeve, though. This is just my wishful thinking. I do like Moraine a lot. I have nothing against Moraine, but um I think that he's been thinking about Nynaeve ever since she saved his life.
Yeah. Moraine is his duty, but his heart lies with Nynaeve.
Yes, definitely. And of course, Nynaeve also has these voices from the Mashin that say, "You'll watch them all die the way you watched your parents die, and you will do nothing to save them." You know, and I actually did it say something about letting Matt die? Or am
Oh,
I
I don't remember. You lost Matt, and now you lose the others, or something like
or
that.
something like that?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And you know, I think that that's very interesting because she has put this responsibility on herself. Although I'm not going to say that it isn't obvious that this is what she's doing. She
mm,
really still believes that she's going to protect everyone.
yeah,
And she has actually done a pretty good job, you know, like unintentionally, of protecting a bunch of Aes Sedai. She did a great job, you know, like
yeah,
of saving the, you know, land and whoever else was present and was injured there. She's done an amazing job unintentionally. But
yeah,
she believes, Nynaeve believes that her job is to make sure that everybody comes home safe and sound.
yeah. And we haven't really gotten into this in the TV series yet, but Nynaeve, she can just channel whenever she wants. She's, you know, it's very instinctive for her. Uh,
Clearly, because this is what happens here.
yeah. And this is a little spoiler for, so if anyone wants to, so you know that. But she has blocks, so she can only channel when she's angry about something.
What?
So
She
yeah,
what?
so she can only channel when she's really angry. So when the Aes Sedai and Lan was bleeding out in episode 4, she was really angry that she was going to lose Lan, and that's why she was able to channel. And here she's angry because she's not, you know, the voices tell her that she's not going to be able to save everyone and all that. And that's the thing that makes it easy, makes her able to channel, because she can't just, like Moraine, you know, just get the one power and start channeling. She must have that instinctive
Well,
feeling to get her
but
going.
so my question to you, and I don't even know if this is a legitimate question, but um when she was a wisdom,
Yeah.
how did she channel then, if at all?
Uh, in the TV series, it seems like she hasn't channeled, but in the books, she channels because she's really pissed off when people hurt themselves or get injured and all of that. So she's not angry at the person because they did something bad to her. She's angry because she hates when people suffer.
That's very interesting. Suffering upsets her.
Yeah,
Avoidable, maybe even avoidable suffering upsets her, or suffering of people that she cares about upsets her even more.
yeah,
And you know, it was obvious that her reaction to Lan and when she healed him was because she cared about him deeply. I mean, I thought that was pretty obvious. You know,
yeah,
he was dying, like his throat was slashed, and
yeah.
you know,
Wh-
it's very
When
hard to
she's
save someone.
when she's upset and angry, that's when she gets this release.
Well, she certainly has a release here, doesn't she?
Yeah. And I'm sorry for if I spoiled anything for you,
No,
if
no, you didn't
anyone's
spoil
listening.
anything.
Yeah,
What's very funny too is that the character is portrayed in a way where she has, I'm not going to say an attitude, but she has a certain demeanor.
yeah. She's very guarded and very standoffish and very, you know, she doesn't crack a smile except when Lan is talking to her. That's when she smiles and she blushes and she shows, you know, all the emotions. But when in any other situation, she's, you know, this pissed off stoic who's going to save her friends and you know, don't have a place for anyone, don't have feelings towards anyone. She's, you know, but Lance is the one that everything you, if you watch the series again, you notice the difference between when she's with the group or when she's alone with Lan.
Well,
That
yes.
yes,
And my question is, of course, when Nynaeve hears this and she sees what's going on, and after seeing the Trolloc, I'm sure also set her off. She, channels the One Power, and I guess as a spell that shields them somehow. It looks like a
yeah,
globe,
yeah,
and it's very bright. And of course, at this moment, Moraine is channeling to open up the gate on the other side. And what I'm curious about is, did the Ogier hear the Mashinshin? Was that significant at all?
that the ogre. I didn't catch that bit. What did you say?
Did the Ogier, let's say, since I didn't see it in the episode, is the Ogier affected by the Mashinshin?
Oh, I suppose that, but we didn't hear his fears and his insecurities, did we?
No, so I was just curious. I mean, maybe he doesn't. Does he not have any? Is that something special about
I I,
Ogiers?
I know that ogre are affected by the Machin Chin, but I don't know. I don't have an answer because this fear and all of this thing, the voices, that's for the TV series. That's not in the books, so I don't have any extra information there.
Okay, well, and that's okay. I thought about that and I said, how come we didn't hear anything for the Ogier? But it's okay. What happens is Moraine goes ahead and opens up that portal. They go through.
Yeah,
Lan grabs Nynaeve as they exit just to make sure she gets out. And when they do get onto the other side, and they all seem okay,
yeah,
they've gotten out, alive. Moraine congratulates them, but you can see she looks really tired. She has these red marks around her eyes,
yeah,
and she looks incredibly stressed. I mean, she's professional, but boy, she looks like she's wiped out.
yeah. And she also have this, the world is on her shoulders, kind of thing. It's her responsibility, and it's weighing on her as well. And they probably didn't sleep that well that night, and so she's tired. She needs a place to rest for a night.
And she also tells them, whatever you heard in from the Mashinshin, put it out of your mind.
Yeah, and she's affected as well by the voices, but
Yes.
she sees how it's affecting everyone else, and you know, uh, I mean, her comment about ignoring the voices is as much for her as for the rest of them, I think.
Definitely. And I think that I don't know whether she's ever experienced that before, which is something I always wonder if any of them have experienced these experiences before. Is it first time for everyone? What's happened the last time that they experienced it? But one thing's for sure is that they do see when they exit, she can see that they are mentally shaken by what they've heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And so, they want to know where they are. Where are we right now? Because obviously, it's not the eye of the world, is it? We had to leave the ways early,
yeah,
and we know that the eye of the world is a day's travel from where they are,
yeah,
and that they're at this city, the fortress city of Faldara, which is the last stand against the Blight. So, what is the Blight?
yeah. So Faldara is a city on the north side of Shi'enar. That's one of the borderlands, and borderlands is because it borders the Blight, and the Blight is kind of the Dark One's corruption that's trying to cover the land more or less, and they are holding back the forces there in this in Faldara. This they um, they're referring to Tarvin's Gap, which is a close, more or less a ravine or something like that. That's where they usually have quite regularly battles with the Trolloc armies that are trying to overrun the land. And but the Blight is like a corruption of nature, so to speak.
And this is exactly what Moraine had warned the party about, that if the Dark One wins, what will happen, that the Trollocs will come and eat everyone they know, and that the land will turn to darkness. And this is probably part of that. The Blight is
Yeah,
probably part of that, right?
yeah, right. It's a part of the corruption and the darkness.
And the Ogier seems very interested in wondering when the last time Lan was in Faldara. And I almost wondered, why was it so important for him to know when the last time he was there? Because we kind of find out that Lan isn't an ordinary person, because as soon as he gets in there, like, everybody welcomes Lan with this title. What was the title? Dashin.
Yeah, Daishan.
And it's very, like, it seems very prestigious title, in the sense that, one, they're excited to see him, and
Yeah.
two, they have to greet him with this specific term. And Lan is, like, oh, hello, very grateful to see people that he knows. But we find out a lot more. They're brought in front of the king, whose name is,
Yeah.
where's the king's name?
Uh,
Agelmar,
yeah,
Lord
Lord Agelmar.
Agelmar.
He's not the king. He's a lord of the Faldara of that border fortress.
Okay,
So
so we see
yeah,
Lord Agelmar, and he welcomes Lan personally,
yeah,
and he does also welcome Moraine.
yeah,
And Moraine, in multiple attempts, tries to warn the king, that they saw a Trolloc. Of course, this is going to be something, she's the first thing she's gonna say. But the Lord is very concerned by the fact that Moraine has kind of just popped up.
yeah. I,
And,
I I think there's two things playing part here. The first part is that he has his pride. He can defend his borders without any assistance. That thing. But then there's also that there's a Aes Sedai has a tendency to insert themselves in other countries and their politics, and they're known to be schemers and pulling the strings behind uh, all that stuff. But at the same time, Agelmar and the Shannarans, they have great respect for the Aes Sedai, but they are also uh, wary of their intention at times.
so they're like, something that reminds me of, from what you said, it reminds me of the Bene Gesserit sisters in Dune.
Oh, there's surely a inspiration for the Aes Sedai comes surely from that one part of it is the Ben Gesserit, but the Ben Gesserit is more. I mean, the Aes Sedai is more magic than the Ben Gesserit are more long time schemers and pulling strings and so on. But absolutely, Dune was an inspiration for a number of things in Wheel of Time, like the opening scene with the Dail woman, Dail. There's certainly some inspirations from the Fremen among the Aiel. I would say the Aiel is a combination of Fremen, Zulu warriors, Vikings, and Ninja warriors with a very interesting honor culture.
Yes. So, well, it's good to see these influences in the different, collections that we're reading here.
Yeah.
And so, Moraine, she warns the king, you've got to close this portal. The Trollocs are coming through here, and we see something very special, don't we? Right after she warns him.
Do you mean a
Hmm.
person arrives through the way
Hmm.
gate?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's where what I mentioned earlier that there was a deleted scene of him holding that that leaf.
Oh.
So
Okay. And so, of
yeah,
course, the question is, why is Padan Fane following them?
yeah. I don't know if we get that in the first book. I don't remember. We get that in the first book, right? Why he's following them?
I don't remember. I'm gonna have to go back and
Either
see.
in the end of book one or in beginning of book two. I can't remember right now, but there's certainly a reason for him following them. But I don't think we should reveal that because it could come up in next episode or in the beginning of next season.
Well, mum's the word, but boy, he is certainly joyful after someone going through this ways which seems very scary. He's
Yeah,
got that joyful smile on his face, and Perrin even sees him, I guess, at some point in the like town square, or walking through the town, and
yeah,
it's clear that his presence is there, and he got through before anybody could close
Yeah.
that gate.
Uh, and something I noticed it was that there were no one with the hoods up or covering their faces in any way in Faldar. Did you notice that? Everyone was bareheaded and no hoods or anything. And that's from the books. That's you are not allowed to have your face covered in any way because the Midral can impersonate people, but not if their head is exposed.
Yeah, the only person we saw with any sort of face covering was in the beginning of the battle.
Yeah,
So that is also very interesting to see. And, after, Moraine warns the Lord, and she kind of speaks to Lady Amalisa, who is the Lord's sister, who
yeah,
used to or is a very close friend of the Aes Sedai. And it's
yeah,
because we learn, and obviously this makes sense. She went to the White Tower at some point
yeah.
and trained at the White Tower, but she never became an Aes Sedai, did she?
No, and if they're following the books with the rings and so on, then she probably became an accepted because you started a novice and then you become accepted and then you become an Aes Sedai if you pass certain tests. And usually it takes maybe 5, 6, 7 years between each step. Sometimes you can do it faster, but so maybe she spent 8, 9, 10 years in the tower, but never became an Aes Sedai. But so she was sent home, and but she can still use the power, but she's not an Aes Sedai.
She can still use the power. She's not an Aes Sedai, but having lived in the tower, she
Yeah,
probably understands the politics and knows everyone. And that's an advantage in itself. Although she says that her allegiance is obviously to Faldara,
yeah,
clearly she has an advantage. She
yeah,
knows how the Aes Sedai run themselves. And that's why Moraine goes to her and says, I need you to send a message.
yeah,
I need you to send a message to the Red Aes Sedai to pick up Matt.
yeah,
Now, this is not a surprise that she would do this. The last thing that anybody would want is for Matt to kind of be running around
yeah.
solo.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think this scene came about because the actors was not part of. He left the project after episode 6. So I think when there was this break with the COVID and everything, and I think they had this scene just so we know where Matt Coffin is when we need to pick him up again. He will be in a cell somewhere or
a
something like
cage,
that. Yeah, yeah.
the one thing
So
he feared the most, right?
yeah, yeah. But
Poor fellow.
yeah, and in the TV series, Moraine certainly trusts Matt less than what she does in the book. In the book, she doesn't trust him to some extent, but that's more like she doesn't trust him to do his duty rather than she thinks that he's a bad person.
Yes, and here we see that after speaking to Lady Amalisa, um, Moraine just wants to make sure that the seer, whose name is Shin, is still in
Uh,
town because
yeah,
this is
her,
where
her, her, her
excuse
name is
me.
Min, Min.
Sorry, Min.
Yeah,
This is supposedly going to be something, at least I think, let's say from Moraine's point of view, that's going to put her mind at ease because
yeah,
she thinks that the seer is going to be able to tell her this is what there's nothing wrong with this train of thought. But Moraine thinks that after she speaks to this seer, that she's going to be able to tell Moraine who the dragon is, right?
yeah. She's desperate for information to start with. She needs to know. She don't want the other young people to, you know, suffer the consequences of going to the other world and not being the dragon. So, uh, and they changed in the books. They meet Min much earlier, just after they leave the two rivers, and she gives some viewings early on, but they wanted to keep the mystery going a little bit longer, so they meet her later in the TV series here, and I think it works pretty well. What did you think, her? Do you think that Min will have a large part to play in the future seasons, or do you think this is the only time we see her?
I think she'll have a large part to play, and she needed them to protect her to keep it secret, because
Yeah,
if anybody found out her abilities, she'd be captured or something like that, wouldn't she? You know,
yeah, people fear what they don't understand, and either they would chase her out, or she would be, everyone would go to her for getting this information, and she doesn't want either of those things.
I think the White Cloaks would be the first ones after her. You know,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
they wouldn't know whether to kill her or to keep her alive.
yeah. And I said I would keep her locked in a room and bring people to see to so they can know what would happen in the future for that person or something. It would not be a good life if everyone knew what she could do.
Agreed. And so, however, what I do like is that she does do Moraine a favor
Yeah,
by giving a reading for everyone. And and Moraine is like, you have to be really specific here. I really, this is maybe your most important reading that you've ever done. In not so many words. And she says that she sees, something I really liked was that she saw Perrin with yellow eyes and blood running down his chin. And I love that vision. I'm like, wow, that is an intense, strong, very specific, somewhat terrifying vision
yeah,
of a
uh,
person. Could you imagine looking at somebody and seeing that? Like, that's like
yeah,
something out of a horror film.
yeah. It's yeah, exactly. It's like a beast or a werewolf or all these things.
Yes. And then we go from that to something very, very tender
Yeah,
with Rand.
yeah,
And he's holding a baby. And Maureen says, well, what does the baby look like? What do you mean he's holding a baby? And she says, well, it doesn't look different from any other baby.
yeah,
And I still don't know whether I fully get that vision, but it's okay. It's okay. I just
yeah,
thought that that was a very interesting transition from someone with like, golden eyes with a blood running down their chin, to someone
yeah.
holding a beautiful child.
Yeah, and I like the before she does all the readings, I like she's okay. The big brooding one. Okay, they're
Yes.
both big and they're both brooding. Who do you mean?
They certainly were brooding. Maybe
Yeah,
that's the number one, you know, um, anti-social behavior of people from the Two Rivers in this series, in the live
yeah,
action series,
yeah,
is to brood. And maybe Egwene is the only one who's kind of like, well, I'm not going to brood.
yeah,
But the others are like, why are we here? We just want to
yeah.
go back to the Two Rivers. We missed Beltane. They messed up Beltane for us, all these sort
But
of.
wouldn't it be boring if they were very like, oh yes, I come along. That's
Yeah,
adventure. That's for me.
it would be very like in Lord of the Rings with the hobbits. Not all of them are as happy-go-lucky, but they tend to be very happy-go-lucky people.
Yeah,
And I think that attitude would not have suited these villagers from the Two Rivers. So you're right. It would be very boring and perhaps unrealistic. I did not understand the visions that she had for Nynaeve and for Egwene, the white
yeah,
flame and a
yeah,
ring of gold. And I thought maybe the white flame might have represented an Aes Sedai,
yeah. It could.
but I don't know what the ring of gold represents.
No.
Is it a wedding ring?
Um, I think I know what it represents, but I shouldn't tell you. You should
No,
watch
don't
and
tell
find
me.
out.
Don't tell me. Don't
Uh,
tell me.
Yeah, you have the white flame, you have the gold ring. Which have the white flame and which have the gold ring?
I'm guessing the white flame is Nynaeve and Egwene has the gold ring.
Yeah,
So
we'll see in a year or something.
yeah, right. It might be 2 years for me to wait for season two, or I could just go ahead and look in the books and see more information. But
If you read a couple of the books, I think you get which is which.
well, perhaps the most shocking vision that we heard
Yeah.
was that for Moraine herself.
Yes, and I have a thing about that I can't reveal for you
Well,
because that would be too much of a spoiler.
I suspect I know what happens, but this is a speculation. It's pure speculation. I don't know exactly what happens, but this is just my speculation, everybody. I have a feeling when it says that the Armelin seat will be her downfall, it could be two things.
Yeah,
It could mean that Moraine will take the Armelin seat, which I don't
yeah,
think is going to happen, but it's an option.
that's an option.
The second thing is that someone else will be replacing Suan in the Armelin seat,
Yeah,
other than
that's
Moraine.
that's an option.
Like maybe Leandrin or someone who really does not like Moraine and could make life hell for Moraine. But this is just that's how I look at it.
I'm trying to have a poker face here. I don't know if I'm succeeding or not.
Well, don't tell me what happens. It's just speculation
Yeah,
because she said it would be her downfall. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, well, wouldn't it be funny if Moraine ended up being the Amerlin seat? And Moraine has been very clear. She does not want to be in that tower. But it
no,
would be ironic that let's say she pulls this off. What if Moraine pulls this off? And she brings the dragon and the dragon defeats the shadow and everybody's grateful to her. She becomes the new the head of the Amerlin, or becomes the Amerlin seat.
yeah,
But would Moraine, is this what she wants? Would she be happy with this? These are questions. At what cost would it be to Moraine? These are all things that I'm curious about because it doesn't just work out so nice and neat, does it? We know that it's not going to be a transfer like that. But so those are just some speculative
yeah.
things I thought
I
about.
can tell you that in the whole series, it's not we go to A to B to C to D to E to F and then we're finished. That's not what this series is.
Yeah. And
It's much more
that's why the
complicated.
series is so good, Stubble, because it's not that way. It's
Yeah,
more like life is, with so many things that can happen along the way. And we also find out that they're all linked and there's lights and shadows. And I saw the light as hope and the shadows as the dark one.
yeah, yeah. It's the light fighting the dark. And when they were together, the lights were brighter. They were connected.
So then that also implies to me that their lives will always be connected,
Yeah, it's
somehow.
it. If one of them is the dragon, it's not just. It takes them all. It's not just one person.
Yeah, and I really like that concept.
Yeah,
They needed to make the journey together, and there
yeah,
was a reason for that. And that is really, I think, wonderful story writing and just really more realistic, because no one is an island. Excuse me. And so after Moraine meets with the seer, she very clearly tells them again, and it seems like she's been telling them this a lot, but they're just in such disbelief of what's going on, especially since it feels like it's right at their front door now. It's not
yeah.
sort of like we have this big journey anymore.
No,
We're a day away from where we need to be. And by the way, you may die.
yeah, yeah. And there the characters brings up this what I've said all along that Moraine speaks the truth or the truth as she sees it and what she thinks. And it may be that she's mistaken about some things.
Yeah, and this is I think we get to realize that Moraine may be mistaken about some things solely by just the vision alone, because the vision isn't what Moraine was expecting,
Yeah,
either for anybody in the party, nor for herself. And what's really significant about it is that why is it significant? I think it's significant because I think that the seer could not give Moraine the answer she needed. We don't know the reason. In other
no,
words, for whatever reason, no matter how hard Moraine asked her, what's going on with these four people, the seer was not going to be able to give Moraine um, the answer she's seeking. And there's a reason why. Now, I don't know the reason why, but it's something that Moraine has to find out another way.
yeah,
Now, there's a possibility that um, there's a possibility that the seer had to have that confrontation with someone else, which we're going to talk about in a second, first before she could go further with what she knows.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but it's okay. Like this is this is the way it works. It's not sort of like you said, A to B to C to D, because that would be too simple, right? It just would
Yeah.
be too simple if she got the answer right there and and then it's over. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense
It
that
was
things
just
work.
one season this series. Yeah, they solved it by episode 8.
Yeah, exactly. And what else is very interesting is the party is faced with this situation. They have to decide whether they're going to go with her tomorrow to the eye of the world, and 3 out of the 4 of them will die. And this is very dour. Like it's a very dour quest.
That's what she thinks. She thinks
Yes,
that 3 of them will die.
and it's like a suicide mission, if you will.
Yeah.
And so they're very much on the fence, and rightfully so. I wouldn't want to go to my death or anything like that, but I think what's most touching is how Moraine is it almost feels like she's wrapping things up with Lan, and
Yeah.
she tells him, I really like Nynaeve. I think she's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
She gives her blessing to to do what he wants to do.
yeah, and I really like that. I love that. I'm like, yeah, Moraine is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And she knows that Lan has feelings for her. And it was nice to get that confirmation, because we saw, the opposite situation when Moraine was seeing Suan, and he says, give her my love. And I'm like, ooh,
Yeah.
give her your love. I'm like, that's a very sweet and endearing thing to say. There must be a very tender moment coming up. And, honestly, I have all different types of things going on in my mind, Stubble. You can imagine when when Nynaeve saved Lan, and you knew he was the catalyst for why she did this. Because
Yeah.
I would want to save him too.
Yeah. He's a very charismatic person.
I don't want to save that guy. He's a good guy. And, there's definitely some chemistry between the two of them. They connected right away. And
Yeah.
we were talking about whether or not this was something that could work between them. And, we get to see Lan with his family, and Nynaeve cannot stay away from Lan any longer.
No, she follows him around when
Yeah,
when
this
he
is stalkerish. This is very stalkerish. And, she would be arrested today for this. This is not, but he kind of like, he doesn't tell her to stop following him.
No. But just as a thought experiment, what if it was a guy following a girl in the same way?
Yeah, it'd be very creepy.
Yeah. But here is more acceptable, I think.
It's
A
a
little
double
bit.
standard. It's a
Yeah.
double standard. And she doesn't do anything by accident, does she? Like this woman, she's very, she thinks she's slick. And she
Yeah.
was not. Like, she was very obvious. He knew she was there. Like, her
Yeah.
hiding was kind of ridiculous. She
Yeah.
should have just followed him.
Yeah, but the one thing I didn't like with the whole thing was when he just appeared behind her. That was like superhuman fast. That was just give her 1 second to look down on the ground or something. That would give him a plausible time to like run around the building or whatever.
Yeah.
It was a bit jarring.
It was very jarring. And, he sees his family. They thank her for saving his life.
Yeah.
And, she's kind of looking at him. They're kind of giving each other these looks. And I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be
Yeah.
a night to remember.
Yeah.
And, when they get back to, I guess, their quarters, he
Uh,
closes the door. Now, I have to be honest with you, Stubble. And this is, this is, Nynaeve reopens the door and goes into Lan's room. He has a shirt off,
yeah.
and she's like, do you want me to leave? He doesn't say anything. What's the verdict on the first move nowadays, Stubble? Because opening the door, going into some guy's room, he has no shirt on. Like it's kind of many of these women here, these Aes Sedais, I'm assuming, like when Alana asked Karena's Aes Sedai, excuse me, warder to join her,
Yeah.
She was not hesitant in asking him, but um,
But they had done that a couple of times, I think.
yes.
That was not their first time that they did that.
So
Uh, yeah,
what's your opinion on Nynaeve's first move on Lan? I mean, she was obviously wanted to be with him that night, but
yeah.
do you think that he could have made the first move? Why did he not make the first move?
I think it's like his upbringing is very, you should be respectful. You should not make advances where if you should take your time. And Nynaeve wouldn't have it any longer. She took the initiative.
Well, I was shocked that she even asked him if she wanted him, like she says, "Do you want me to go?" And I'm like, "No, don't ever ask that question. Never ask that question." You're in his room. He has no shirt on. Do not ask that question. You were not invited in. You entered into his room like that.
Yeah,
If he didn't want you there, he would have pushed you out of the room.
yeah,
So, of course, we have what we finally been waiting for all this time, Stubble.
yeah,
Well, maybe I've been waiting for this through
yeah,
all this time is for Lan and Nynaeve to finally get together and make love in this. This is what a lucky girl. What a lucky girl she is.
yeah.
Um,
And
honestly.
I know you like the romance in your fiction and in your movies, and so I guess this was a highlight for you.
Oh, Stubble, it was so fantastic. I was so happy for them.
Yeah,
It was so wonderful because she's been wanting him for so long and he's kind of been wanting her and
yeah.
just
He's been interested, but um, he. Uh, I think it would always was she was always going to get to take the first step. I think.
well,
I think.
she almost has to because she's a leader in her town, right?
Yeah,
And she has to make these decisions. I think she wanted to do that earlier. Let's say if he didn't go to see his family, this would have happened a lot sooner, right? But
yeah,
they had to go through that ritual um,
yeah.
to go.
I think it's a cultural thing as well because his uh, his culture they would never you know presume that they are very standoffish until every box is cleared. So
Well, when Lan takes his robe off, you notice that he has like these really intense scars on his body. Like these things are
yeah,
huge.
yeah,
And I'm like, where did that come from? Like it looks they're big, you know?
yeah,
So something happened to Lan. He was in
yeah,
some battle maybe where he got
yeah.
messed up very badly. And
And
he's been
you get the sense when Perrin was healed, they said that the yellow Aja is so good because they're not leaving even a scar, which seems that his injuries were probably healed by Moraine, where there probably is a little bit of a scar
Moraine did
afterwards.
a shoddy job. No, I'm kidding.
It's battlefield medic compared to a physician, a professional.
We saw that too with Corinna, and when she healed Moraine, it did leave a scar on her. But I have to say, I'm really happy. I thought it was, maybe a little strange how they kind of hooked up, but I also thought that it was a very touching scene,
Yeah,
and they obviously wanted to be with one another, and I'm sure it was an incredible night for her. Just lucky woman. So
what did you think when he said good night and closed the door?
I was like, I just my jaw dropped because and he said it with a smile too. Like I was like, "Oh
Yeah,
my god, he rejecting her?" I thought he was rejecting her.
it was like a respectful first date almost.
No first kiss on that first date, but after everything they've been through, Stubble, this is a little different. Like
Yeah,
while it was a first date, this was more like I'm bringing you home to meet the parents. Um because
but I have a question for you.
yes.
Wasn't it more satisfying when they drew it out a little bit longer?
Yes, it was more satisfying when they drew it out a little bit longer. It was very, very satisfying, I have to say. Visually, the whole thing, emotionally,
Yeah,
the payoff was
the music was great as well.
yes. And it was very gentle, it was very sensual. I loved it. I just think it was just a beautiful moment, and I watched it several times, so,
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
and
Um
we don't really get that romance feeling so much in our movies and TV shows nowadays.
We don't, and I just
It
love that they're
yeah,
having it here for us, and it's not even, like, necessarily hidden. We see a number of times where they talk about feelings for one another and how they care about one another and, like, sending messages of love and concern and wanting one another. There's a lot of
yeah,
wanting in this series, and
yeah,
it's realistic. This is how life is. I mean, there's a lot of that going on, and
yeah,
they reflect that in this series very and in a tasteful way.
yeah.
You can see the look of longing in Perrin's eyes. Now, I don't know what Perrin is longing for, but there's
No,
definitely something that's missing, isn't there? Like
yeah. I think there maybe some feelings there, but it's not like anything is going to pursue at any time.
mhm, and
Uh, yeah,
when he looks over at Rand and at Gwen, I don't
yeah,
think it's jealousy, it's more like, he misses having that
yeah,
feeling with someone, and
yeah,
and I think that that's his main concern, but so did Nynaeve. When
yeah,
she saw them together, she had that similar feeling.
yeah. And I have a question for you. Do you think that Moraine felt what Lan felt?
Oh, yes, but I think she felt everything,
Yeah,
and I think that you remember how she had blocked him when she was with Suanne?
yeah,
I don't think she did that in this particular case because she didn't know it was gonna happen.
no,
So she felt everything.
yeah,
She felt everything, and maybe that's why Lan kind of pushed her away a little bit
yeah.
because he
Uh,
saw
uh,
the connection with
Yeah,
Moraine.
and you also get why Moraine gets what that interested in Nynaeve because she must get that feeling every time Lan sees her. You know, so they have that mental connection,
Oh, they
emotional
sure
connection.
do.
Yeah,
They certainly do have that connection, and now that Moraine has experienced what Lan has experienced, it makes it a little bit easier for her to ease up on her bond with him, doesn't it?
yeah. And what do you think will happen with that?
I think that they're
Do you think
let's
they will?
say
Yeah. Do you think?
hypothetically,
Yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead.
hypothetically, if things work out between Lan and Nynaeve, because Nynaeve is not going, I think that when she consummated her relationship
Yeah.
with Lan, she's saying that she's not going back to the Two Rivers.
Yeah. More or
This
less.
was her point of, I'm not going back. Um, Perrin, I don't know what he's going to do. Egwene, I also don't know what she's going to do. But once Perrin and Egwene, let's say hypothetically, agree to go to the Eye of the World, they're saying that they're not going back to the Two Rivers.
Yeah.
And of course, that leaves us with one person. I can't answer the question for you fully yet, only because if things work out between Nynaeve and Lan, she now has to consider Lan what he wants. You're in a relationship now. It's not just you anymore. You have to
Yeah.
ask your partner certain things. And
Yeah.
so it's no longer just you. So
Yeah.
depending upon what Lan wants,
Yeah. But it's only Moraine who can release the bond if that's in the books.
but we've
L-
seen her shield it once or twice when she wants to.
Yeah,
So I have a feeling that if the conditions are right, and she thinks that what she's doing, or even if she's alive, um, I think that she'll do it. I think that she would release him because she mentioned how he needed a break. And
Yeah.
I thought to myself, well, I don't think Lan looks at being connected to you as being a burden, but she wanted the break because she wanted to be alone with Sue-Ann.
Yeah. Do you think that Nynaeve could have a relationship with Lan while he'll still bonded to Moraine?
I think she could, but it would be it's a threesome. I mean, it's not maybe Moraine could bond with with Nynaeve. I mean, it could happen. This is not
Yeah.
so far-fetched because we already know that they can link powers together. Maybe
Yeah.
they could link things together, other things together as well. So I wouldn't be
Yeah.
so afraid of it. Like I would be fine with it. Like I'd accept if he wanted to still be bonded to Moraine. This is just me.
Yeah.
I
We
think
we will
Nynaeve would accept it.
we will just have to watch and find out what
Yeah, well,
happens.
she obviously must have accepted it because if it had been any other person who is not into that, they would have said, "You
Yeah.
know what? I really can't be with you. You're kind of with somebody else." But
Yeah.
Nynaeve didn't do that.
Right.
So let's just think about this. She knows what's going on.
Yeah.
She's not foolish. She's now shown herself to be a very powerful channeler. She knows what's going on, but she was not going to let this opportunity with Lan pass her by. After all, she might even be looking at the situation as if she might be dying tomorrow when they go
Yeah.
to the eye of the world, right, Stubble?
Yeah. Yeah. But do you think that the Nynaeve Lan relationship will evolve either positively or negatively in episode 8?
I think it's going to
Or
be positive.
you hope it will be positive?
I think they're going to be inseparable, Stubble,
Yeah.
because Nynaeve will force Lan. She's not going away. He allowed her in. If he would have had to have physically just pushed her away and said, "Hey, back off." But he
Yeah.
didn't do that. So like Nynaeve is like she's latched onto him. If Moraine has bonded with Lan, Nynaeve has latched onto him. She's
Yeah.
like she's on him. Even when she's not there, she's holding on to him. And this is a really very interesting way to look at it because as a wisdom, she's not supposed to be doing that, but she probably has had these desires for so long. This is
Yeah.
something that's very interesting is that the idea that, a person is going to go ahead and say that they're not going to have a relationship
Yeah.
is fine. You can decide that. That's fine to decide that. But there are some people who decide that and still have desires to have relationships with people. And
Yeah.
I think that once we can kind of like acknowledge that sometimes people really do are still going to fall in love, they're still going to have feelings for somebody, even though they've sworn not to do that. It's like that's when you really realize that people are human. These things are going to
Yeah.
happen. And it's not anybody's fault that that happens. People do fall in love with people they were not intending to fall in love with all the time.
Yeah.
So she's latched onto Lan. She's not going to let that feeling go. And I don't blame her because she shouldn't, because he feels the same way. And in this uncertain world, where the dark one is waiting,
Yeah.
she better hold on to him.
Yeah.
I don't think she's going to find a love interest anywhere else.
Yeah.
She needs to hold on to that guy and he needs to hold on to her because he's not ever going to have that kind of relationship with Moraine. He's not.
No, that's not their thing at all.
Yeah. And
But
so I think
but
Moraine understands that too.
yeah, but from a storytelling perspective, it would be more drama if there were more obstacles in the way.
Well, I don't see Moraine as an obstacle because you're right, but she's
She's
clearly
an obstacle
stated.
to their full, you know, she's
She's an
kind of an obstacle.
obstacle
Yeah.
to, you're right. She's an obstacle in the sense that what she feels is the right thing to do may conflict with Nynaeve. And we've seen it.
Yeah.
We've seen that.
Yeah.
Nynaeve is constantly challenging her. And for
Yeah.
Moraine to say that she likes her, maybe Moraine likes somebody challenging her. Like this is something that she really, really kind of excites her. Maybe that's true. I mean, this could be something that Moraine is even more excited about because she can feel Lan's feelings.
Yeah. Maybe they are too similar. When people are too similar, they can rub each other the wrong way sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
and also, we kind of after this incredibly beautiful and climactic moment between Um,
Uh,
and I could talk about the relationship between Lan, Moraine, and Nynaeve all day long, but
yeah,
we don't have all day. But I could talk about this all day. But to progress the story for the sake
yeah,
of the viewers who have been able to stand hearing me talk about this romance, um, which I'm like I said, I think it's a beautiful thing. If it stays the way it is, I think it'd be a beautiful thing for all three of them,
yeah,
or four of them, I guess, if you include Sue Ann. Um, what an interesting relationship. Um, we see a very interesting scene where Rand is with Nynaeve, and he agrees, like they had a fight from that
yeah,
comment about Perrin and everything. And
yeah.
he says, you know what? You're probably going to be an Aes Sedai, and I want you to go to the White Tower.
Oh,
And if you,
he talks with Egwene, not Nynaeve, I think.
yeah, pardon me. I actually wrote down the wrong name because it says Rand makes up with Nynaeve, and I'm like, no, it should say Egwene.
Egwene.
Rand
Uh,
makes up with Egwene, and he says this really beautiful thing to her about, you need to go to the White Tower. You need to become an Aes Sedai. Like it was like the pep talk. This is what you need to do with your life. I'm your boyfriend. I'm going to support you. It was like, yeah, it felt really good. And he was like, I'll even be your warder. And I was like, yes, yes, yes. Like felt so good to hear him say that.
yeah,
Um, it just was like music to my ears. And even she was like, obviously she was very happy to hear that. And he was like, I wouldn't let anybody else be your warder. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, I really
yeah,
like that. He wouldn't stand, he'd fight somebody else to be her warder. And it was very, very romantic to me anyway. I
yeah.
thought it was romantic.
And they had
Um,
a little makeup session after that.
Definitely a makeup session after that. I mean, love is in the air tonight. And
Yeah,
and the scary part is that the next day is the day that they all think, like they're going to meet their fate. Like it's very like heart-poundingly tragic in a way.
yeah,
And uh we also find out when after Nynaeve and Lan have been together that Lan is no ordinary man. Of course he's not.
no,
He happens to be a future, or would have been a future king of Malkir had they
yeah,
not been overtaken by the blight. And I think that intrigues Nynaeve even more. Like, you thought she had her hooks in Land before, like
yeah.
she's not ever gonna let go of this guy.
But she also feels like, a bit intimidated by the whole thing, I think.
She does, and this is getting back to what we were talking
Yeah,
about with Moraine and how the other Aes Sedai sisters viewed her because she was a woman of noble standing.
yeah,
And I guess Nynaeve is not of noble standing. And realizing that this would have been a great question to have asked him before you did anything with him. What are there, like 10 questions you ask somebody before you
yeah,
sleep with them? This might have been one of the questions. Oh, by the way, just a
yeah,
question about your family and such. you know but she didn't go down that road with him. It was more, it was a little different for Nynaeve, a very different road.
yeah,
And she's hooked on this. Like, she's not ever letting Lan go. And Lan actually feels like he has to convince her that
yeah,
that he's not owned by Moraine. Owned. And I think that
yeah,
all along, Nynaeve has always felt that warders are like property, like they're like cattle
yeah,
or something.
yeah.
You can
They don't
trade
have their own
them.
will. They just follow their orders and do
That's right.
whatever.
You can trade these warders if you want a different
Yeah,
like, it's kind of a foolish notion on her
yeah,
part, but clearly they're not that way at all. That's
yeah.
not at all what's happening here. And after the
Well,
experience,
it varies from water to water and Aes Sedai to Aes Sedai. Some Aes Sedai have their waters very, on a tight leash, while Moraine has, given Lan a lot of freedom. So there is a scale, a sliding scale on how owned a water is by the Aes Sedai.
but it is an agreement. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
consensual agreement. And also, there are some Aes Sedai who aren't supposed to have relationships,
yeah,
but do. And I really like that. I love Leanne
What did you
Grin
mean with not supposed to have relationships? What did you?
because she's a red Aes Sedai.
Oh, yeah, right.
And she's not supposed to have a relationship, but she does.
Yeah,
And Moraine knows about it. And I'm like, yeah, she has this guy, like I think it's great. Like, she says, I still want to be a red Aes Sedai,
yeah,
but I can't go against what they're doing. I think that there's a lot of things that might be like that for some of the Aes Sedai. And,
yeah. And
you know,
she had a man at North Harbor, and that's flipped. A sailor has a girl in every port.
yeah.
So,
Yep.
yep,
There's definitely a lot of romantic interludes and situations, scenes of
yeah,
a sexual nature, romantic situations going on in
yeah,
these people's lives, and I'm glad that we're seeing that. It's not like completely devoid of love and passion and yearning. And if anything, we see more than anything else, I think it's yearning in this series, that
yeah,
yearning for whatever it is. And I really think that makes you yearn for the series.
yeah. You get
um
invested in a relationship.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I
And
just want to inflict
yes,
one thing also, but
yes,
yeah, because his title was Daishan in the TV series, and that was like future king or something like that. In the books, it's diademed battle lord that Daishan means, which I think sounds much cooler.
yes. It is much more formal. It sounds like if there was a ceremony, you would have to address him as that
Yeah,
name. And I think they did this for simplification.
yeah, yeah,
um and I also liked how Land compared Nynaeve's dedication to Matt, Rand, Igwen, and Rand in the same way that
yeah,
he was dedicated to Moraine. And so, it's kind of like touche,
yeah,
why does she feel so like she has to be so responsible for them when they're clearly adults? I mean,
yeah.
they don't own her, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's not the same, but there are certainly similarities between them in that
and
regard.
so, after we leave this beautiful moments, Rand
Yeah,
has had a beautiful moment with Igwen after
yeah.
all the makeup sex, which is what it is.
A question about that: would you like to see more, or do you like that they cut away from the act, so to speak?
I always like to see more. You don't. This is have to be. This is not. It doesn't have to go into like explicit sex, but I do like to see a little bit more.
Yeah,
And that's okay. Like nudity is definitely something I love to see.
yeah,
And I think that is once you remove your clothes, as I've said before, you're removing any barrier. Let's say symbolically you're removing any barrier between you and the other person.
yeah,
So it's like no matter what your role is in this world, now whatever role you had before, it's gone, you've taken that off, and
yeah,
now it's like you're equal with the person. And so for me, like that represents another step in, like for example, they made a point of showing Land take his shirt off. you
yeah.
know
But
there was a point of that.
there's mostly partial nudity in the series. It's not like full on, except Lance butt cheeks in first episode. There's not been much.
So he's been the most exposed person in the series. Um, you're right. There hasn't been a lot of it, and it doesn't mean that I'm disappointed in it. But I've seen other series with that had nudity in it, and it was not degraded in any way because it had more
Yeah,
nudity in it. I think that let's go ahead and represent what they're feeling and what they're doing in a realistic way.
yeah.
You're not going to
But
be
but
yes.
sometimes it can be used as a crutch if you don't have the story to back it up. Sometimes.
Right, and this is very true. Like, for example, show us nudity, but it doesn't have to, this is not a strip joint. We're
Right.
not expecting everybody to look a certain way. That's not what we're asking for. We're asking for an intimate moment between two people. And if
Yeah.
we get that and there is nudity and it is tastefully done, it enhances the experience and seems more realistic. So,
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen a little bit more, but we might see more. Who knows?
Yeah.
Um, but perhaps not. I don't know when it comes to rating, how that goes.
It's I think it is it 16 in the US or something?
It's
14, 16?
ridiculous,
Yeah,
especially here. Like if it was in another country, we would have seen a lot more nudity, I bet.
yeah,
But
yeah,
because they had to do it, let's say maybe for it had to cater to us. Maybe maybe I'm surprised because you remember Stubble. There's UK version and American version, and the UK version sometimes has more nudity.
yeah,
And I'm surprised we didn't get that unless we do have that. I don't really
yeah.
know.
It's okay with killing and slaughtering, but show a bit skin. Oh,
I
good
think the
heavens.
human body is beautiful, and I'm not I think perfect bodies or a perfect body is unrealistic. I want to see flaws and imperfections. I just want to see that intimate connection.
Yeah,
So
and the actors they are good looking, but they are not like model. You know,
no.
they're
And that makes it
attractive people,
even
but
more interesting.
yeah,
We
because
already saw
you can
I'm sorry, go
relate.
ahead.
You can relate to. I don't have Lance physique, but I can still.
Stubble.
Yeah,
Stubble. How do I know? I have never seen you stubble.
yeah. But I can guarantee that I don't have that.
Well, you know what? It's okay.
Yeah,
But they even made a point of showing Land with these scars. Like there's some
yeah,
significance to these scars. He's not
yeah.
perfect himself.
No,
So, aside from, that thought, there still is something to be said for an intimate moment between two people where they don't have clothes on. That's what I'm
yeah.
saying.
And I must say that the actors were great. They were really good in these scenes. I'm really impressed with the acting.
They really have shown us the potential for the world that they've created for us, but also their performances. They're going to be nominated for awards for this show, I think. And it's an intriguing show, and you're right, the performances are incredible. And it makes you want to see more, which is something very interesting and very pleasing. And so, let's say we're approaching the 2 hour mark,
Yeah,
but I'm enjoying every minute of this. Um, we see Rand,
right.
and he's just, he's there with the love of his life, Egwene, and she's asleep. And we see that he's getting these sort of like flashback moments, and
Yeah,
things are troubling him. And we kind of got an impression that he had some issues because he also had somewhat of a tormented look on his face, like Perrin has had.
yeah,
And not just worrying about Matt, right? It's
yeah.
not just about Matt.
And Rand has been brooding through the entire season, and now we get the reasons why he has been brooding on the entire season.
Yeah. What we see are flashbacks of Rand seeing very specific signs in his life
Yeah,
that place him as possibly someone who is not from the Two Rivers.
yeah. And we get that fever dream because the cold open was more or less taken from the events in the fever dream that Tam has in the beginning of the books, and in
Yes.
the as it is depicted here. Uh, and we get that yeah, Rand has probably not from the Two Rivers, but that Tam found him.
Yes. I mean, remember we heard someone say, well, your hair
Yeah,
is a color that usually is not found in this region.
yeah,
And, I guess it isn't. I mean, it's not anything that I personally would have known or anyone would have known, but it's pointed out to him. Was it the Gleeman who said it? Was it the Gleeman?
he emphasized that the Dail had the dead Dail in the cage had red hair, and
Yes.
that
And
was a sign of, you know, uh, that he was an Dail. But
yes.
there are others who have red hair, but Dail especially have that.
And then he made then we hear flashback to when they were in that when they were separated from the group and they ended up in this town that looked terrible. And the woman who worshiped the Dark Lord
Yeah,
says, that's an iron door.
yeah,
You can't bust through that iron door.
yeah. It takes 3 men your size or something to that effect.
And yet he plows through it. And then we, for the first time ever, when he plows through it, we see that there's channeling that happened.
Yeah,
And that's it. That might be the first time we see Rand channel. We also see his father saying that, um, I think he says something like,
found
you
him
were
in the
so
snow.
small when I
Yeah,
found you,
he
or
he
just
think he's
something.
talking to his dead wife, and he's talking about how he found this child, and oh, you couldn't have. I I I mix up the book with
He
the
was so
TV series now.
little and
Yeah,
just a beautiful child, and how he obviously was going to take care of this child, this beautiful
yeah,
baby. um and then also we see more references to the heron on the sword.
yeah,
And then we also see another part when Rand is with Matt and they're near the tower, the White Tower, and he
right.
says, oh,
I
I
remember that
recognize
mountain or
this.
whatever. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
Dragon
and
Mountain, where you know where we suppose he, yeah, where he was born, so to speak.
then we learn that the Machin tells Rand very specifically
Yeah,
that he's the Dragon Reborn. Now that must have scared the living daylights out of him. Like he
yeah.
must have been terrified. And
I
I'm
think he
surprised.
I think you already suspected, because the wind seemed to take your thoughts and amplify them, the negative thoughts or what you fear, and he probably already thought that he was probably the one, and the wind just emphasized that bit.
We also see that he channels to get rid of the Trolloc while they're in the way.
Yeah,
So he was the one who did that. It was not Egwene.
yeah,
And Chin admits that the first vision that she ever had was a
yeah,
man carrying a heron marked blade. And it was obviously Tam,
yeah,
who she was referring to. And she saw Rand, who was born with red hair, and
yeah,
that the child was raised by Tam in a wooden house by the two rivers.
yeah. And we get
And
to see the cold open again, but we see what happens afterwards. After the sword is pointed at her, we see that he helps her deliver the baby, and she dies, and yeah, and we see that he takes care of the baby. And I just wanted to emphasize one thing for you. Here's an example of how Robert Jordan subverted tropes, because in the prophecy of the dragon, it's he should be born of a maiden, and she's a maiden of the spear. So, so she's not a maiden. You think of a virgin, virgin birth thing, but that's not the case. It's she's a maiden of the spear, so he was born by a maiden. So it's one example of subverting one of the tropes. You know, like Anakin Skywalker was.
oh yes, I
Yeah,
recall that.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it definitely was not an ordinary birth. He was born on the battlefield.
yeah,
And, he had no idea of this history of his, and his father kept it a secret
yeah,
because he was fighting the enemy, right?
yeah. Right, and he was already involved with Kari, his Rand's mother, and he thought that in the books, Carrie couldn't get she couldn't get a child. She couldn't get pregnant. So he thought that they could raise it as their child, and so yeah. And
So it
I have a lot more to say, but it would take too much time.
oh, how well, we're almost at the 2-hour mark. I wish
Yes.
well, when we do the season wrap up, keep whatever you wanted to say in your notes,
Yeah,
and I want you to elaborate as long as you want to on this
yeah.
because it's
Uh,
important. This is what we're here for. This is why we're doing this series is to
but,
have this
but there
time.
was a lot of spoilers and stuff involved there. So, but we'll leave it at that for now, at least.
Well, we certainly are shaken up by this because we're presented with a situation where Rand feels compelled for the first time in this journey
Yeah,
to go to Moraine directly after hearing from Chin that he is the Dragon Reborn.
yeah,
And I was very surprised to see this because I thought he hated her guts more or less, But he's doing this because he wants to sacrifice himself so his friends won't be killed, right, Stubble?
yeah. But he's known all of this from like the end of episode 1. He knew that his father wasn't his father, probably, and that's probably why he was acting up against Moraine, and why he was brooding, and why he was, you know, the way he was a lot of the time, and so it's been eating him all this time, and finally he just, let's get this over with. I don't want any more of my friends to get hurt.
And as far as I'm concerned, he woke up Moraine, told her, they left immediately.
Yeah,
Lan was occupied, Nynaeve was occupied, Egwene was asleep, and
yeah,
Perrin was probably asleep. So, essentially they left that night and they might be halfway or almost, you know, almost complete. Well, maybe not, but I have a feeling that they left quite some time
yeah,
before everybody else even got up. And we see a scene where the party realizes what's happened, and we get to see Moraine and Rand in front of this like ominous tree structure.
yeah.
And
But
Rand says, "What is this?"
yeah, and it's the blight. But I just wanted to mention, when Egwene enters the room first and she finds an empty bed, and I love the interaction she has with Nynaeve, which she, you know, I know what you did.
I know where you were last night. You were
Yeah,
with Lan. How was it?
yeah,
And then Lan shows up. She's like, "Oh, wait, don't wait till later. Tell me later."
yeah, yeah. And when it comes to the blight, it doesn't it doesn't look like I imagine it when I read the books, but I get the same vibe from it that I did. So
Interesting. I guess
yeah,
they had to make it so that you could see them as they're in it.
yeah,
It has to be somewhat open, but it does seem very ominous and like, what is that? And you're right, it's not as scary. I thought there might have been more bramble and thorns and,
but
you
maybe
know,
that's the farther they get into the, maybe it's worse.
I would have asked, I was like, is there any way we could fly over this? Can you conjure us over this thing? Because this thing
Yeah,
doesn't look really, ideal to go through. And you can see how that could take over an entire land. You can't do anything. It's horrible. And
yeah,
it truly is a curse. It's like you put a curse on that land. Um, But I have to say that this episode really was very exciting for me.
yeah.
Um,
A
and
lot, a lot of release of pent up, you know, frustration of Lan and Nynaeve.
definitely a release of pent-up frustration. I'm so happy for them, at least right now.
Yeah,
And I'm just curious as to what's going to happen with Rand and Moraine as they go into that horrible light and get to the eye of the world, if they get there.
yeah,
So I sure hope they get there by the end of the season 1, because I don't know how I'll feel if we don't know what
yeah.
happens.
And for me, it's interesting to see what they will do at the World, because I know what happens in the books. I don't think they'll do exactly the same thing, but I don't think it's the Dark One's prison there. I don't think that. I think it's ah. I shouldn't say
No,
what I
no,
think.
don't say it. Don't
No,
say it.
no. But I think that I don't think it's the Dark One's prison. I think Swan was misled by someone or something.
Interesting.
But that's just my speculation.
No, no, I understand. That's very interesting. Okay. It's definitely something that we are very in the dark about what's going to happen. And like I
Yeah,
said, they better let us resolve some of that
yeah,
before season 2, because I'd be very upset if they
yeah,
didn't, but I suspect they will.
yeah. And I think that the cold open in the episode 8, I think I may be wrong, but I think that will be the prologue to the Outer World.
Ah, well, yeah, that would be very interesting.
Yeah,
I have no idea how they're going to do it, but what I was going to say is thank you for joining me
yeah,
in this review of this episode. I thoroughly enjoyed it, Stubble. This is a 2-hour episode.
yeah,
It was fantastic talking about it, and we could probably talk even longer about this.
yeah,
But I do have to stop it at the 2-hour mark. And I just wanted to thank you, of course, for your expertise on the Wheel of Time. And, we are going to be continuing with the final episode
yeah,
this upcoming week. So please join us again
yeah,
on Positive Fandom as we go into even more of the Wheel of Time. And after the series ends, we're going to go back to the books. So
yeah,
it's going to be a nice continuous foray into the Wheel of Time for quite some time. So
yeah.
thank you for joining us. Thank you, Stubble, again,
Thanks.
for joining me. And for you guys out there, like I said, check out episodes 1 through 6 that we reviewed. This is episode 7. 8 is coming up. And we're going to continue our series. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, be kind.